company wants to use Vasa 6 or Go BHB or any of the products that y'all put out, how does that, do they call you up and say, all right, we're ready to start putting this in our products, and then do y'all just have crates of the stuff just lying around a warehouse and y'all ship them the products so they can put it with their manufacturer, or do they just go straight to your manufacturer and source it from them? How does that whole process go about?
Yeah, just a little bit of the supply chain, just quickly. And it's, from a consumer standpoint, I think this is probably interesting. So what happens is, briefly, the supply chain, we buy it from the manufacturer. And again, we just said it could be a California, a Colorado, a China, whatever. But the bottom line is, we buy it from that manufacturer. Before we've done that, we've had to, audit, make sure that that manufacturer is good, that you can scale up, that the actual product tastes okay, that it mixes in water or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That goes into a capsule or the dose or, all these sorts of things you're working on in advance, okay? Once that's all worked out, then you bring it in the United States. At that time, hopefully you've worked out all the other regulatory stuff, right? We went over that. It was like you spent $500,000 to, work on toxicity data or clinical trials or whatever. But let's say that's all done, right? You've all done that. So we're, again, buying it from, let's say, China. It comes into California. It goes into your warehouse. You've hopefully generated some content.
Yeah.
So that means content means like a reason why someone should even use your stuff.
Right.
Like in a pre-workout. You should use it in my pre-workout because you're a pre-workout because, it is great for, let's say, power and endurance. Like, all right, sweet. Let's try it. So then you send a sample. They try it and literally determine with their athletes, internally, whatever, if they like the taste, like the flavor, and whether or not it actually works in practice. Not just the clinical trial. They then say, yes, I want it. We then have a warehouse full of it, like you just said. Let's say it's several thousand kilos.
Yeah.
And they're in drums, like 25-kilo drums, like 55-pound drums.
Right.
So think of like a big barrel. You ship that barrel on a pallet. It goes to a contract manufacturer. And that manufacturer literally has, a forklift. And they weigh out, let's say the pre-workout has like, let's say 10 items, right? So they weigh out those 10 items, one of which is, let's say, let's say a few, like, you got like Pico 2, Vaso 6, and T-Cream in the product, let's just say. You weigh those out, you grab this pallet of now, like, weighed out stuff.
Yeah.
You lift it up on top of, like, I would call it almost like a balcony. And there's a stair to that balcony. You have workers that go up to that balcony, and they're literally with, like let's say a box cutter, cutting open the drums, cut open the bag. They dump it into a giant blender. So think of like a Cuisinart, right?
Yeah.
A giant Cuisinart. But on top of the Cuisinart are these little tiny holes, and that's what sifts these materials because you want to make sure there's no foreign materials.
Okay.
Right. So one, we have to have good quality, right? In our Vaso 6 or in our T-Cream or any other ingredient, you can't have any foreign materials. You can't have heavy metals and all that stuff. We have to test for that, screen all that prior. Well, you also don't want to cut open one of the bags and have a piece of plastic fall into the blender, into the Cuisinart.
Right.
So there's actually a sifter on top of the Cuisinart. So you dump the material into this, on top of this, like, sifter that has little holes in it. So the ingredients go in, but the plastic doesn't, for example. It then goes into the blender. You shut it. It then starts blending over, depends on what kind of a blender, but it could blend anywhere from like 1 minute to 20 minutes, and you get a homogeneous blend, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that easy, but anyway, homogeneous means everything is evenly dispersed, right? Your flavor, you don't want Vaso 6 in one part of the blender, and you have Go BHB in the other part of the blender.
Yeah.
You've got to be evenly dispersed, so every scoop is equal in your pre-workout, for example. You then discharge. The workers then walk back down the stairs. This blender is raised on stilts, essentially, so it's off the ground. So you're now under the blender with a big old bag. And the big old bag is on, essentially like arms, essentially. And you just dump like 1,000 kilos, like 2,200 pounds, for example, into this gigantic bag called a super sack. It flies down. While it's flying down, it's sometimes you can have like a metal a piece, like a very it's a magnet, like a rare earth magnet, like a very, very powerful magnet, in case there were any sort of metal shavings or anything that came from like the blender or anything like that. Oftentimes that's there. So as it's flying down, all that powder through that hole into that big super sack, you're making sure there's no foreign materials in there. Again, like for like that's probably the fourth time you've like made sure there's no foreign materials. Like it's really intense, right? To make sure that's cool. Someone then takes that straight from the bag. Again, think gloves. Everyone's in booties. Everyone has hats on. It
looks like a surgeon going.
It's a surgeon. Yeah, exactly. Surgeon going to the OR. Thinking of that. You actually take that product. You walk it over to a lab. You put it in water and you taste it to see if that matches the control. Because your pre-workout was, let's say, orange mango. Right. Oh, let's do one that's, sorry, let's do a funny pre-workout one. Blue ras. Okay.
Oh, God, the one flavor I absolutely despise.
We got to say, we got to, if we're shouting out sports nutrition, we got to say blue ras. Got to be blue ras. So you literally have the control because you made a lab sample of blue ras.
Yeah.
So you literally have the control, 8 ounces, you have your scoop. You take it right out of the bag, straight from the blender. You dump it in 8 ounces of water. You taste one against the other and you see if it's good. You go, yes, it's good, fantastic. You're not done. You then have to send it to a lab to make sure that the citrulline is in there because you can't actually send the bottle with a label that says 6 grams of citrulline or 300 grams of Phaso 6 or 100 milligrams of T-cream.
Right.
And it's not in there.
Right.
That's illegal.
Correct.
So now you got to send it out for testing and make sure that analytically, because you already know what's in there from what you added physically.
Correct.
You know you added 100 milligrams of T-cream, but no one cares what you added. You have to prove it analytically. So then so that's why labs in this country have an unlimited amount of business forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah,
every single lot, every single time, you have to prove that what you added is actually there. Because no one cares what you say.
Yeah, it's what you can prove.
Is what you can prove.
I think I know just figured out my next business venture. I'm going to open up a testing.
But that testing equipment is super expensive. So then you finally, after all that, and you've proved that it's in there, and you've also proved that there are no micros, you then bottle it with a label. You ship it off to the customer. The customer then ships it to GNC or Amazon, and the consumer gets it.